Please join us for our third annual Leadership Circle Summit at Cognia's corporate headquarters in Alpharetta, Georgia, January 13th through the 15th, 2025. Learn pragmatic solutions from our expert keynote speakers, Amanda Ripley, AJ Crabble, and Cognia's own president and CEO, Dr. Mark Elgart. Connect with other educational leaders to identify simple solutions to complex problems, share governance challenges, and establish critical professional networks that best support your work. Find out more about Cognia's Leadership Circle Summit at cognia.org or email us at leadershipcircle@cognia.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, educators, welcome to Leader Chat. I am Jeff Rose, and today's a first for us, and you will see why. We have two guests, and we've had two guests before. We've had two guests on camera. We've had two guests on site. But this two guests, the setup is different. We actually only have one person that we are going to be interviewing, and it's going to be a stellar guest, and you'll see why I describe that here in a second. But we also have a second interviewer. You can consider this person one of my partners in crime. His name is Alan Smith. He is our new Vice President of Leadership Development here at Cognia, and he's been an incredible teammate. But he happens to have a close personal relationship with our guests. And so the concept here was, let's invite Alan onto the screen and the airwaves with us so that as we're talking with our guests, it is really based upon kind of this foundation of familiarity. So we're really, really excited. So you will see Alan Smith as soon as I invite our esteemed guest. The concept today is navigating change and being the first. Navigating change and being the first. For those who are watching us or listening to us, remember Leader Chat. I want to remind you to follow and subscribe. And today we're going to be talking to Susana Córdova. In 2023, Susana Córdova was named Colorado's 18th Educational Commissioner and the first Latina to hold the state's top education position. Prior to being named commissioner, Córdova spent more than 30 years in education. She served as assistant principal, director, chief academic officer, chief school officer, and deputy superintendent before becoming the superintendent of Denver schools. So I want you to consider that list I just read. She checked every leadership box. She also served as the deputy superintendent in Dallas ISD, the second largest district in Texas. Córdova grew up in Denver and was a student in the district. She later went on to lead. So she's local. She spent her entire student career in DPS and graduated from Abraham Lincoln High School. As the DPS superintendent, Susana led significant improvements in student outcomes, including an 8% increase in graduation rates for African-American students and a 10% improvement in Latina students in graduation rates. In 2020, under her leadership, students completed more than 31,000 rigorous courses with a passing rate of 89%, and elementary multilingual students outperformed their peers across the state in reading. So without further ado, I would like to invite Susana as well as Alan to the screen. We are thrilled to have you, Susana, with us. Welcome. Thank you so much. And after reading your bio, which I know I cut like in a fifth. So I had to, take a lot of liberties at making changes because I can go on and on based upon your experience. So you've had this extraordinary career, but just tell our audience what I didn't read. Talk to us about maybe what drives you, what has been your why or is still your why in your work. There's a lot I left out in between the lines, so how about you fill the space?
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Jeff. And Alan, it's great to see you here. Alan and I worked together for a lot of those years in Denver together, so it's really fun to be able to share this space with you. I guess I am still really motivated by the idea that we are such a unique country in that we create the opportunity for all kids regardless of where they come from, regardless of their language, their place of birth, to come into our schools and get access to opportunity through education. It's been really fun to be back in Colorado. My grandfather on my father's side was a coal miner, and he actually died at 24 in a mining cave-in. And I really believe it's only in a place like the United States where you can go in 3 generations, dying in your 20s as a miner, to having a granddaughter be the commissioner of education in Colorado. And it's 100% because of the support I got from amazing teachers in public schools. And that's what drove me to become a teacher. It's what keeps me motivated today, in paying it forward and making sure that we have those great opportunities for kids across the state of Colorado to get access to a better life.
Can I ask one more question before Alan's going to dive in? As the first Latina Commissioner of Education in Colorado, can you talk to us about how maybe that shapes your why and focus? I mean, I think as you talked about the trajectory of your family over these 3 generations, which I think is a really stellar example, but you are the first, and there is something to that. So how does that shape the why of your work?
I want to tell this really quick story. I was walking out of the department. Our building is right across from the Capitol. I was walking out of the department shortly after being named the commissioner, heading to my car, and a young woman was walking down the street, and she walked up to me and she was like, "Hey, are you Susana Córdova?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I didn't know who she was. And she said to me, "I just wanted to tell you that I worked in the Denver Public Schools when you were the superintendent, and you were so inspiring to me because I never knew that we could have a superintendent who looked like me." This was a young woman in her 20s, a Latina. She now is working for the state of Colorado in a partner agency here on my same block. And it really struck me that, it's easy to think about the impact we have on people we know, and what it means to be an example to my own children, for example, to be an example to the people that I work with. But this was truly, like, I don't even remember her name. I couldn't tell you where she worked. And she saw in me an example of something that she could aspire to, that she hadn't seen before, and felt compelled as I was walking down the street to come up and introduce herself to me. I think that's what being the first is. It's certainly I would say a testimony to the people who helped me get here. I did not get here by myself, but it's an example for others of what they can become as well, which I just don't take that very lightly.
Alan, you and Susana go way back, right? Yeah. So that being the case, let me kind of hand the floor over to you for a minute to maybe describe not just Susana, but even obviously tell us about yourself, but not from a bio perspective. Talk to us about specifically maybe what you know about Susana that she didn't describe about herself, but you know about her as a leader. And of course, be sure to tell our audience about you too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be on this podcast with you, Jeff, and of course, Susana, who in many ways, helped shape my career. And she is an outstanding leader. My story is similar to her story. I'm a native son, went through DPS, graduated and became a leader in the district. And then, my career kind of took a little different direction. But the one thing that I understand about Susana is really important, and that is leadership is not just professional, it's personal. And she really cares. She cares about her students. She cares about her employees. She cares about her community. And she puts her heart, sweat and tears into everything that she does. And so, professionally, it was extremely easy to work with her, right? She was very clear, but she was also very kind. And personally, what I enjoyed a lot is Susana won't tell you this, but she is an outstanding cook. So I've seen her do things to chicken that I never thought could be possible. And it was just amazing. And I still remember when we were
Excellent.
sitting at our house, Jeff, and she whipped up this dish, man. And I really wanted some more, but there were more people around. So I couldn't take, I couldn't take more, but yeah, she's
That's fun.
outstanding at that. And just very, very much involved with the community. So there's a lot I could say, but the greatest thing I could say is I can call her a colleague, and I can also call her a former boss. She entrusted me enough to hire me as her senior deputy superintendent. So, with Susanna, in shifting a little bit and thinking about all of the people that you worked with and the relationships that you've established, how have you been able to continue to keep those going? How have you been able to lift people up and put them in different positions, and then continue to inspire them to do great work in the different roles that they're now in?
Yeah, well, thank you, Alan, for that kind words.
It-
Before I answer, I just have to tell people, Alan is just a fearless leader. He's
mm,
the kind of leader who will always do what's right, even when it's not easy. And so it was an easy choice to have Alan work so closely with me because of that element of his leadership. So it's really nice. I think you're right. I really believe that the work starts and ends with relationships. And, I'm the kind of person who it can be years later and I'm still texting with people that I worked with in previous lives. I'll see something that reminds me, or I'll see a person who looks like them and I reach out.
mm,
And, at the end of the day, I've had so many times when somebody really disappointed me by
mm,
leaving a team or taking a new job. And
mm,
what I always say is like, I'm going to take my boss hat off first and
mm,
say, whatever it is that you need to do that's in the best interest of your life, I'm here
mm,
for you.
mm,
Um, then I sometimes try to put my boss hat back on and try to say, hey, what can I do to keep you here? I want this to be in the best interest of your life. But I completely understand that at the end of the day, the work that we have the opportunity to do together
mm,
is just that. It's work. It's very, very important. But I think it's much, much, much more important to be in each other's lives, to support each other around the things that make the most interest, that make the most sense for our own lives. And that's
mm.
been something that I've appreciated when people have supported me in, and that I've tried to do for others.
I would agree with you. I think that relationships, no matter
Mm.
what, especially as we think about the potential of future changes to the way we engage students, the way that we learn our systems, that relationships will always be this foundational, this bedrock of our work. We can't subtract that and assume we're going to be successful. But when we were preparing for this conversation, you said, I've seen more change in the last 5 years than the 30 years prior.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. I mean, obviously, you think about the duress that we experience, which sometimes compacts the need for change, which, our COVID chaos definitely did. Thinking about that and thinking about the pace of change, what do you imagine as a visionary? Because you would have to be in your role. All leaders should be visionaries to a degree. What would you envision are future changes afoot that maybe some people who are not in your position, they wouldn't see?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we're just now coming up on the 5-year mark of the COVID school shutdowns and everything that happened to disrupt our lives. It feels really like 100 years ago in some ways. And I think that's a statement about the pace of change that we're experiencing in our lifetimes. I would definitely say that some of the changes that we're going to continue to see, one of the things that happened because of COVID is it became very clear you did not need the four walls of school for learning to happen. And I think for young people in particular, their tolerance for sort of an antiquated approach to learning that's about a teacher in the front of the room and kids sitting in a classroom and 8 to 2:30 or whatever it is. It's just not their experience any longer. I think about my own children. My daughter's in her early 20s, and she is self-taught in so many ways because of the ubiquitous access to information. And, I think we're going to continue to see the accelerated pace of change because of things. Artificial intelligence, because of access to information. I think that there's some real cautions in that, both um, disinformation and the need to develop the critical thinking skills that are going to be so essential for our society to be able to continue to thrive. I just don't think we can put that genie back in the bottle, though. And I think it's really important that in the education sector that we embrace how we are good stewards of learning in that context.
You said something that's just extremely powerful. I don't want folks to lose sight of this statement that you said, which was in the last 5 years, we've seen more change in education than the last 30. And you then just brought up something that I think is extremely important, and that is AI. How we're going to use it. Yeah, right now, we don't quite understand how to use it to our advantage and to the students' advantage. But when you think about it as a state commissioner, what kind of innovative ways do you think we can incorporate AI so that students who basically grew up with technology in their hands can use it to their benefit to excel in education, whereas they may have otherwise been lost?
Yeah, for sure, all of these tools, they're really tools, right? And it's like, how do we ensure that people know how to use tools
Mhm.
appropriately, how to be discerning about the kind of tools that they pick? Like, one of my favorite things to say when it comes to AI is like, we would never say, oh, it's cheating to use a forklift. You need to pick up those boxes by hand. We would never say
Mhm.
that. But somehow this idea that using tools
Mhm.
to help us do
Mhm.
things better, faster is somehow cheating. I don't agree. I think it's
Mhm.
all about like, how do you use them appropriately? How do you use attributions correctly? How do you figure out what's accurate or inaccurate within it?
Mhm. Mhm.
How do you help yourself get better through the use of tools like this? And so I think it's
Mhm.
going to be really important that in the education sector, we're thinking about how do we teach kids to write good prompts? How do we
Mhm.
teach kids to review things? How do we teach kids to validate things? I don't believe that any of these AI tools are going to replace people, but I do think it elevates what it is that only people can do,
Mhm.
and that
Mhm.
gives us the opportunity to, frankly, spend more time on that with our
Mhm.
students.
Mhm. Yeah.
Susanna, can we go even a little deeper on this? Because, and I'm really appreciative that Alan asked you that question, and you mentioned it being a tool, and right, full agreement. That said, it's a significant tool, right? I mean, yes, there was a time that we were concerned about students using calculators, and we've adapted and we've adjusted. It probably took us longer than it should have as it relates to allowing students to use calculators. But AI is not just a calculator. It is going to be an evolving tool that truly is going to impact lives, right? And the way that we interact, the way that we engage, the way that we produce, and then the way we consume. And we're just starting, right? And my curiosity is for us. It's not necessarily for you, but I'm curious about your thoughts on it. Is the speed in which we in education are willing to embrace and lead the change? Because we've had some AI conversations on this show, and we're just starting, and we know that there's fear, and we know that there's enthusiasm too. But how we find that, healthy balance or healthy state of disequilibrium to go faster, because as you said, students,
Yeah,
they're ready, right?
yeah,
And even if we're not. So what is your thought on how we, in a kind of
yeah,
slow-paced environment like education, keep up?
yeah. I frequently think back to the beginning of the internet, and do you remember Like, we wouldn't let students use Wikipedia as a source. It wasn't a valid source. And I don't know about you, but like, I look up things on Wikipedia literally every day.
Mhm.
And I think we've gotten smarter about how we use it. I look at the footnotes, I see where the
Mhm.
information's coming from. There are times when there's an article and it says like, needs work, these have not been
Mhm. Mhm.
verified. But there was a point in time where it was like, no, you can't use that. And I think we say, no, you can't use it at our peril. And that frankly, what we need to be doing is getting smarter about what does it mean to be an effective user of AI in the school setting? And frankly, I love your calculator analogy. If you're in a store, you still need to be able to do like estimations to figure out
Mhm.
if this is 30% off, do I have enough money
Mhm.
to cover this? Sure, you can whip out your calculator, but it's a lot faster if you can do
Mhm.
some mental math. Like, the
Mhm.
fact that we
Yeah.
have calculators doesn't mean you don't need to know how to count change, that you don't need to
Right.
know how to do percentages. Like, you should know how to figure out what compounded interest is going to do to your payment. Sure, a calculator will help, but we need those skills.
Yeah.
Alan's going to drill down here in a second into because we have some Colorado questions for
Right.
sure, right? But before he does that, I have one question that's not just Colorado, right? It's you've in your career you've prioritized addressing inequities, right, and supporting multilingual students. And as we talk about this dangerous term of equity, and we don't even need to talk about why that's dangerous. But politically, it sometimes is. And it's really, really misunderstood. I'm curious about what your perspective on leadership practices and strategies are specific to how we really analyze and close gaps. And I don't mean, the concept of in what is instructionally what's best, or what is research based. Because,
Yeah.
by the way, we know what's research-based. We actually know a lot of answers as it relates to quality instruction. Here's the dilemma. Leading it in such a way where our people are doing it to fidelity to create the consistent change that our students deserve. What are your thoughts around leading some of these practices that are equity-based that our students deserve? Does that make sense? So not
Sure. Yeah.
research.
Yeah. I always come at it first and foremost as a parent. What I wanted for my own children in their education, I wanted them to be in a classroom where they felt like they belonged, where they felt seen, where their gifts were acknowledged, even when they
Mhm.
were struggling. Kids are more than just their deficiencies or their gap areas. And frankly, I think kids accelerate in their learning when they feel like they're in that kind of supportive environment. And that, to me, that really is what it takes to address those gaps. It means we need to have great teachers everywhere. I'm a big believer. There's not a problem that we haven't solved in education. We just have not solved it everywhere, and we have not solved it for everyone.
Mhm.
First and foremost, that starts with, strong, caring teachers who are committed to getting better, being
Mhm.
available to all of our kids, and making sure that the most vulnerable kids, as much as possible, get access to those people first.
Thank you.
Uh, you brought up some great word, access, right? And we know that Colorado, well, you and I know, maybe other people don't know, that Colorado is one of the most educated states in America, especially when we talk about bachelor's degrees.
Mhm.
And I was talking to a young man the other day, and this young man was explaining to me why he wasn't interested in going to college. And he basically said, I just don't see it as a great return on investment. But you have done some great work in post-secondary readiness and getting students, providing them access and allowing them to experience those things in high school. How, within this higher ed system, which in a lot of ways is falling apart, how do you help students continue on that path and let them know that there's a place for them there and it's important?
Yeah, I would definitely say this is one of the places where both Colorado is a leader, and we need to be open to re-envisioning what it means to be ready for the
Mhm,
next steps after high school. You know,
mhm,
in Colorado, we call it the big blur, and it's,
mhm,
blurring the line between high school and what comes after high school.
mhm,
For a lot of kids, that's going to be earning college credits in high school. For some kids, that might be work-based learning experiences that lead to livable wage jobs.
mhm,
It might be exposure and attainment of credentials that are non-degreed, but that can
mhm,
help you get that first job in the workforce. For low-income kids in particular, it's far more likely that they're going to be able to pursue some sort of post-secondary credential if they have the ability to have a job that pays them enough money to live. And for many of our kids, college just feels like it's out of reach because they don't feel like they have what they need just for the basics. And so I
mhm,
don't think it has to be either or. I think what we should be doing is talking with our young people about their interests and then what's the pathway to livable wage jobs that really
mhm.
provide the kind of social mobility that's so important for our state to be successful.
Susana and Alan, the three of us, we've all led in different systems over the course of our career.
Yeah.
Right. And the one thing I noticed, and it was a practice I thought was fun, I think it flustered some people I was working with at times, is when I would go into a new system, I always knew that they had and this is in air quotes for those that aren't watching the video, a strategic plan. That they just did. And as an assessment, I would take that strategic plan and I would hold it behind my back. And then I would quiz the leaders of the district about it. And literally, I would formulate a very basic quiz, and then we would grade it together. And I would find that often the very people targeted with leading the strategic plan had a hard time articulating it.
Mhm,
And I used to say, how strategic is the plan if we don't even know what's in it?
Mhm.
Now, that being said, when we were talking recently and we were talking about a strategic plan, you very succinctly
Yeah.
talked about these three really important pillars. I mean, I was extremely impressed. And by the way, I am a critic when it comes to strategic plans.
Yeah.
You said serving, guiding, and elevating.
Yeah.
And you said, that's our plan. And of course, there's details beyond those three words. I'm going to hand this over to you because I want to know some level of detail and depth, not to prove that you know the strategic plan,
Sure, yeah.
but for you to kind of describe to what you did to us earlier, because I find it inspiring when you can nail it the way you did.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. It's really different to work in a state Department of Education than it is to work in a K-12 district. It took me like a number of months to kind of get my head around it, frankly. And that's part of what really helped us land on these three pillars, so obviously, one of the things that we need to do is we need to serve the field. We need to support them. We need to provide them with resources. We need to provide them with training. We need to have that feedback loop around customer service that is so important. But a state department is different from a district in that we are the primary organization that receives laws and has to make them make sense to districts, has to promulgate the rules for how you implement the law, and needs to be responsive. And I talk about service and guidance always being in tension with each other. Like if all you were doing was serving people, you could help them break the law. Like there are times when people want to do things and would love your help, and it's not lawful. But if all you do is like wag your finger and tell people, these are the rules, and you don't listen to context and you don't help them problem solve, that's not helpful either. And so service and guidance are two of the main pillars. And then I think as a statewide agency, we have the unique luxury of being able to see things across the state and to be able to elevate them. That's both elevate the bright spots, the places that are finding great success, who are beating the odds. It's also elevating the voices that name the challenges that are going to be so important for us to address. And so that elevate role gives us this unique opportunity to share the themes of what's most important in our state for supports, but it's also, highlighting the really great things that are happening.
Great. Now, before Alan, because I know you're itching to ask questions, you're next.
Yeah.
We are going to take a quick 10-second, maybe 15-second commercial break. I'm going to hand this over to Chris. Chris, you're up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Richard, and I'm the producer of the Leader Chat with Jeff Rose podcast, brought to you by Cognia. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, please make sure you follow or subscribe to us if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, or Podbean to make sure you're getting all the latest updates on the newest episodes. You can also check out our video episodes under our Cognia YouTube channel. Please make sure you check those out and leave us a like or a comment and let us know how we're doing. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Back to you, Jeff.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that, Chris. Okay, so Alan, dive in. You got this next one.
Yeah, you know what, Susana, I'm just thinking of something that is so dope, right? You are one of 50 state superintendents or commissioners, 51 if you count Puerto Rico, right? And with this new shift in education that might be coming federally, the states could have more control.
Yeah.
What makes you excited about that opportunity and gives you a hope for the future that this could actually be a good thing?
Yeah, I feel really lucky to be in Colorado. We have a governor who is very focused on education. Governor Polis is the head of the National Governors Association. He's created his platform completely around education with his Get Ready program. We have a House and Senate, both majority and minority leaders who are very committed to education. And so I feel like no matter what happens in the federal transition, as a state, we are very unified in our support for K-12, in our the opportunities for choice in education, in doing everything that we can to safeguard funding, and for the work around innovation, frankly, that I think is going to be really important in the coming years. The big blur that I've already talked about, the focus on, the foundations of reading, and then a real focus on how do we make Colorado the best place for educators to live?
You just dropped a word of wisdom a minute ago around this concept of serving. And I kind of want to just poke on this a little bit because I think it's really important advice, especially coming from you, because servitude we know that we're drawn to as educational leaders, right? It sometimes even identifies our why. In the meantime, we also know that leaders, especially in this fast-paced, frantic environment, are often running around putting out as many fires throughout the day as possible and serving all day long, and sometimes maybe being distracted from leading, because at times there's a difference. We know that they're important, but it's not just serving. We want people to lead. So right now, and to Alan's point, as serving as this example for the state of Colorado, looking at future changes, whatever they may be, we're going to have to zig and zag. What advice or thoughts do you have for leaders in terms of their personal leadership strategy to not just be prepared, but of course to lead versus just serve?
Yeah, I think it's really important to allow myself to use the data to help with leading. We can get so wedded to a solution that we don't actually look at the data to see, is it bearing out that this solution is the right solution? And so I think the zigging and zagging really is about, like, how do you use the data to help inform your strategy? How do we fail forward, fail fast, pick up and keep moving? State agencies are not super nimble, but I do think one of the things that we have the opportunity to do is to embrace this concept of, like, data is not a punishment. Data is a way to help place some markers for both where we want to go and how we want to get there. And if something's not working, to make sure that we have the courage to say, let's try something different, and see if we can move further that way.
Alan, you know this. Susana, most of our systems in the leadership circle all but this are around circling leaders up. We say circles are better than rows. We have strategies where we want leaders to help each other, right? We think that's one of the most effective and pragmatic ways for leaders to learn. So if you and I, if all the three of us were to pretend that we're around a table, and with us are superintendents, principals, and everything in between. I'm going to start with Alan. And this is kind of this drop the mic moment, elevator speech. Alan, I'm going to give you about 15 seconds. And what you're going to say is why you're going to describe, knowing Susana, why it's important that leaders look to Susana as an example. We're setting her up for the true drop the mic moment. So, Alan, knowing Susana and how she leads, and also what you and I talk about in terms of what's around the bend in education, what says you? Go.
Yeah. Well, if I have to boil it down in 15 seconds, I'm going to stay away from the obvious. I think that there is a lot of inspiration that she provides, not only as a woman of color, a native doing this work and very hard work at a very hard time. But truly, she is open to ideas. And she just said it. She just said that, state agencies are not that nimble. But she recognizes the need to be more nimble as a state agency. So she listens to her people. And I think that is really important. The very last thing that I'm going to say, and believe me, there's a ton more, is that she's truly committed to doing this well and doing this right. This is not a job for her. This is a calling. And you could see it in her work. You could see it in her results. And that to me gives me a lot of hope that her work can be an example in the state of Colorado, but also in the country for others to actually follow.
So if you didn't turn red, I was watching you, Susana, but you may be feeling a bit embarrassed as he kind of set you up. But I'm going to now turn it to you. And the concept here is, once again, around the table, we're ending the conversation with leaders. So it's not just talking at, but talking with. And you want to leave them with just some last kernels of advice. Kind of, this is what I want to leave you with. And once again, very, very short, 30 seconds elevator speech. Ready, go.
Yeah, I would tell leaders that the most important thing that we can do is both believe in our teams, but believe in ourselves. There is truly nothing that we can't do if we work hard, work together, set clear goals, and like with grit and determination, just keep after it. I'm just such a believer that we can make things possible and do big, enormous work successfully if we are really clear about it and we put the hard work in. And frequently, I think what holds us back is our own self-doubt. And what I would say is just believe.
Well said. Alan, I'm sure I'll be seeing you in about an hour at the next meeting in some way. And so know that I very, very much appreciate you. You're an incredible colleague and you're the man. And thank you for this. And Susana, I'm really glad that we were able to have this conversation. We're very specific in kind of the kinds of leaders that we're recruiting for very specific reasons. And it was the right thing for us to do, to reach out to you. And we want to thank you for not just this time, but providing some content that is very digestible and pragmatic for leaders, which is exactly what we aim to do. Know that you're appreciated.
Well, thanks so much. It was great to just connect with you in this way.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, it was a great conversation, and really the first time we've ever done that. We're thankful that Alan was at the table with us, and more importantly, Susana Córdova, that we had the opportunity to kind of pick the brain of a leader doing some very important, very complicated work, and is back and forth on the dance floor and the balcony. And to have her on the balcony with us for the last, 45 minutes is just so much appreciated. So ladies, gentlemen, educators, leaders, thank you for the noble work that you do. Be well.